Amazing. So today we have Anne with us on the Becoming Cosmically You podcast. So, Anne, explain to our readers and our listeners who you are and where you come from.
Yeah, well, thanks, Lou. Thanks so much for having me. It's really joyful to be here with you and your audience. So I grew up in Melbourne in Australia, and I had a single mum. I was on my own a lot as a kid, and I found great sanctuary in connecting with nature as a young child, and that stayed with me throughout my life. But in that beautiful embrace of nature, I also just felt the livingness and the presence of more. And it always stayed with me. And it just, I just knew there was more. And so from early on in my teenage years, I was really searching for what that more was, what that extra element of the beautiful nature and energy that I had felt was. And so I studied a lot of different esoteric traditions throughout my teens and then in my 20s. Um, in the meantime, I got a science degree and I worked at Melbourne Zoo and I worked in a gym and I did all sorts of curious things just to, you do the usual make ends meet. And then I met a wonderful spiritual teacher who taught a very practical, heart-centered, ageless wisdom that was focused on earth healing and personal development. And I really felt a great resonance with that. And I began doing a lot of work there in learning and training and developing my abilities and in doing earth healing work and in teaching and running retreats. And I was in that organisation for 20 years before my teacher passed, sadly. But she's still with me on the inner. And for me, it's been both a journey of discovering my own sense of self, but also about discovering my sense of relationship and responsibility in this world. Because I see a lot of spirituality is in this time has a certain self-focus, which is good because we have to develop self. But we're here as part of a beautiful planet, as part of a beautiful system. And so I really had a focus on that, I suppose, in my journey and have been always looking to gain more insight and understanding about that feeling I initially had as a child of that beautiful living presence of the earth herself. So that was sort of the start of my journey and moving through some of those years and decades and teaching in many places and helping people to find that connection to their beautiful heart and soul and spirit. And also, as your beautiful title depicts, the cosmic connection, because there is a beautiful light and love that flows to this earth. And it's very nourishing, but we don't often open up to it enough or believe it or trust it or allow it to really become present in our day-to-day. And that's what I've always been very focused on, is how do we build that strength of alignment and connection with that wonderful greater sphere of living light, while also being here on earth, because it's such a privilege to be incarnated here. It can be hellishly difficult. I mean, everybody who walks the spiritual path has had difficulties, right? I mean, that's how we often get the nudge to say, come on, have a go, do something a little different, reflect a little differently. And it can be really challenging, but it's also incredibly beautiful and such an amazing privilege to be able to be here and have the opportunity to bring that incredibly loving light of spirit from cosmos, from soul, from heart, into what we do here on earth to help create positive change. We really badly need change, positive change. We need more light. We need more illuminated thought and feeling and choice here on earth for all our sakes, for the planet, for all the creatures, for nature, for everything. So I really feel strongly for that. And all my life has really sort of pulled all of those threads together in many ways, to bring me to a place where I feel a strong connection, but more consciously so, with this beautiful world and with what we can do here, when we open our hearts to that loving light that comes from whatever source you tap into, and let it manifest here, let it guide us to be present here in this world.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I talk about the heart connection a lot because I think there's a lot of I think there's still quite a lot of work to be done in the 3D collective, and that I think a lot of people struggle to use their heart because of the wounding that they've been
Yeah,
through, and
yeah, for sure.
the trust that goes with leading yourself, right? That's a whole chapter
Mm.
in the story as well. What do you see in your work as like the major um factors that are stopping people from being able to connect in the way that you have?
I think, um, there's probably a couple of factors. I think it's one, as you say, a lot of people carry a lot of wounds. There's a lot of collective pain in humanity and in the earth. Um, we have a lot of collective karma from terrible wars that we've had on this earth, and they create a lot of grief and pain and distress. And that, in times of distress, we look for comfort. We don't look for the challenge of opening and awakening, which can be challenging because it's different. So we look for things that are familiar and comforting, and we don't turn to that deeper inner light that perhaps we're not so familiar with. Um, I also think that in our cultures, so many of our cultures around the world, we've lost contact with the earth. We've
Mm,
lost that contact with this planet being a beautiful living being that we're connected to and that we have gifts to share with. We're not just here to take stuff from the earth and build stuff with it and make our houses with it and give nothing back. We're not here to just take food and give nothing back. We're here as part of a living system. And I studied permaculture as well, and I know that's so intensely focused on understanding that everything is part of a system. Everything has a role. Everything gives and takes, and it goes in a complete circle. And that's life. That's the sustainable life. And we, humanity, are not living sustainably in this world. And I think we've, in so many ways, been drawn into the forces that pull us into incarnation, which is a materialism. They're useful, they're valuable, they draw us into this physical life. Without it, we'd waft off and float away into the land of soul and spirit and live in that beautiful light. See, we need something that draws us down into this beautiful world, as well as the spark of spirit and the force that incarnates to create our life. But we also have this pull, like a pull of gravity, but it's like a pull of love from the earth. She wants us here, but she wants us here in consciousness. But the pull to bring us here is very material. And I think our cultures and the focus on the economic model of life, where everything's about how much you can make more out of things and get more, take more, do more. It traps us into that wheel of thinking that's very sort of focused on an isolated approach to life, not a model that brings us into communication with that bigger picture of being a valued part of the Earth's living system, where we have a valuable contribution to make, but also incredibly beautiful, loving light to receive. We're not familiar with it. We're not taught about it. We're not encouraged to explore it. And it's easy in this world to get trapped in either the pain and challenges that cause compromise, or those material lures that can pull us into too much of a narrow focus on those material things. So I think that they cause a lot of distraction for people, and unfortunately, it's often those times when we're challenged and get the little nudge or the big nudge through inner or outer circumstances that we start to think, hang on, something else needs to happen here.
mm. Yeah, a lot
Mm,
of the topics that I've been speaking to people about recently is all around surrender and just allowing
mm,
yourself to be guided. I think a lot
yeah,
of the resistance here in 3D is that people always do things what they think are expected of them, or they do it to compare with their neighbor without even thinking, is this it for me? Is this an alignment for me? And I think that's what trips people up a lot. I think there's
yeah.
always this scarcity, isn't there? And when you lead from your heart, you don't have scarcity because you know that you're always loved and guided. And
Mm,
yeah, I was just being told by my team that even in death and rebirth, we have this beautiful ecosystem where our
mm,
bodies, if our bodies go to the earth, my other half is a funeral director, so she deals
yeah.
with people who have gone to the afterlife, or
Mm,
however you view it. She deals with the physical bodies, and so
mm,
even in this death process, we have this responsibility to heal our bodies, because
mm,
otherwise we're putting our bodies into an earth and we're not healing ourselves, and so we're
mm,
creating this again, more pain and more trauma going into the earth, and
yeah.
we're really being called up, I feel, in this year especially, to do. I mean, a lot of us have been doing the heavy lifting for a long, long time, right? I mean, I get blamed for being a spiritual bypasser, and I'm like,
Mm,
no, 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 no. I've been doing this work consciously for over a
yeah,
decade now. That is not
yeah,
bypassing. I just get to enjoy the good stuff now because I've done the work. Thank you.
yeah, yeah,
But it's
yeah,
funny how people try and label you as well in the spiritual world, and it's
yeah.
like, no, I don't ever label myself. I'm a multi-dimensional infinite being, and so are you. I'm not a guru. You're the same.
Mm,
Just you don't realize it,
exactly.
and you haven't woken up to the fact yet, and you're not being consistent. I see a lot of humans, I don't know if you, Anne, but just not being consistent with anything.
Mm, mm, mm. Well, I think that's also part of what's happening. We're in such an enormous shift at this time. I mean, not like this moment, but like this decade, this century. I mean, however long you want to see it. But I mean, our Earth is changing. Our planetary consciousness is changing. Like, we've got to keep up, because the Earth herself, she's a living being. She's evolving. She's drawing in more heart light. That's the information I've been given. And it makes sense to me. And also, what we have in our human society is so much fragmentation of those structures that have held our beliefs in the past, that have held us in some kind of system where we could have a place for a god or a spiritual being or a spiritual teacher, and our societies. Some spiritual traditions would also include the earth, not many, unfortunately. Some did. But they're fragmenting now because a lot of them haven't kept up with the change of consciousness in our world, with the change of how the earth is absorbing light. And the fact that she's absorbing light in a different way means that we need to absorb it in a different way. And those systems that have held a certain amount of light in the past don't always hold it anymore. Some do because there's individuals with light who hold it. But a lot of these sort of religious or spiritual institutions and paths and practices from centuries and millennia past, a lot of them don't have a sustained light to nourish us in going forward. And for people who don't have that inherent sense inside, it's quite difficult because you're left without a sense of, well, now what? I used to believe this, or I had this in my sort of personal sphere, and now I don't know what to believe. And I think one of the other things that's really tricky, because it almost goes the other way. I think that a lot of people find now that it's so easy because there's a lot of conscious change. People find it easy to open up to elements of the inner worlds, but not all of them are light. And I think that's
Yeah,
one thing that a lot of people don't realize. I hear
yeah.
so many people say, oh, I picked this up intuitively and I saw this and it must be true. It's like, no, it may not be. It's like you have to actually really learn, because there's as many naughty, tricky, mischievous people as there are in the physical world, there are on the inner world, and they will have a lot of fun with you if you just open the door and say, I'll believe anything that comes from that sort of realm. And
Mm,
that's, I guess, I've been recently working with a way of developing more clarity around our consciousness and our intuition. And I found, if I might share with you, I have these 5 steps, 5 key principles, if you like, for guiding the awakening of consciousness and intuition. May I share that with you, Lou?
Yeah, I'd love
And
to hear. Yeah, definitely.
okay, so it fits with the words love all. So the L is for listen, because that's one thing we don't do very well as human beings. You know, we often don't even hear each other physically, let alone from the inner. But it's also about listening with that understanding that we need to discern. Just
Mm,
like when we listen to people spout rubbish in, you know, in the street or on the TV or whatever, you know, you sort of say, no, that doesn't ring true. We need to be careful how we listen, but we do need to find a way in our personal selves where we can bring that silence in our being, whether it's through a meditation or just our own daily practice of mindfulness, whatever path you choose, to listen. Then the O of love, the O is to be open, because if we listen and really want to understand that intuitive nudge from spirit, from the light, we have to be open to the direction it might take us. As you would for sure know, sometimes you go, whoa, that is quite an interesting thought, quite an interesting change, quite an interesting reflection. And consciousness happens at the edges of our awareness. We're aware of lots of stuff, but to be really conscious, we have to go to the edge of what we're aware of and bring ourselves there in openness so that we can be ready and willing to explore further, to stretch ourselves further. Then the V in love is for validate. And again, that comes back to the fact that we need to bring those intuitive perceptions, those little nudges from our consciousness. I say to bring them into our heart, but you can take it to wherever you find your sense of truth. But to bring those things into your heart and to really sit with them and say, okay, does it feel true? Is it kind? Does it really feel necessary? And is it the right time? There's some of the key things you can ask, but also just to have a sense, is this really resonating with the right thing for me now?
mm,
Then the E in love is for being earthed, for bringing the earth into this picture. Because if we want to be in this conscious relationship with the earth, which is our spiritual journey here in this world, we need to remember that and to just ground ourselves, feel the earth, really connect, and allow what we've picked up to resonate not only through us, but see how it resonates into the earth. Does it does it flow? Does it have light that moves into the world that we live in? And that is another way of validating, but it's also a way of making it alive in our earthly perspective. Then the all is for allow. We have to allow ourselves time and space to absorb what we pick up, what we understand, what we're seeing, what we're sensing, allow ourselves to take the journey, because becoming conscious, opening up to our intuition is not an instant thing. Sure, you can get a lot of instant intuitive understanding, but to really take a conscious journey, we have to allow ourselves to take the journey and to find the time and the space and the practices that nourish us to really allow ourselves to be filled with that light and find that sense of truth in our hearts. Yeah, so they're the things that I find a good way of anchoring in this world where there's often a lot of stuff swimming around, inner and outer. You know, it
mm,
can be overstimulating. And I think it's important to find a way of drawing in our sense of self and anchoring it into some truth and reality as a spiritual reality. Yeah.
I love those, Anne. I love those. I really love those. And it's so important to understand. My team just want to add something that this journey is your own unique
Mm.
journey, and you're never
Yeah.
going to find an answer from somebody else doing it their way entirely. You have to actually live it
Mhm.
and breathe
Yeah.
it. And I think one of the things you mentioned previously is that the kind of like the systems and the services and the ways of being that we used to use are crumbling down, are breaking away. And I've seen that a lot, a lot of
Yeah.
healers. We work with healers and service providers, but I'm seeing a lot of really advanced healers relying on things like healing modalities to heal other people. But
Mm.
in our experience of using those, and this isn't to discredit anyone, it is that they will only take you so far. You've really almost got to create your own modality.
Mm.
And we're seeing
Mm.
that a lot with the people that are coming through, sharing their stories on the podcast, that almost every single person that we spoke to is creating their own healing modality based on
Mm.
their own experience. And
Mm.
I see that so amazing, because in years to come we won't have people like spiritual healers, because everybody will just be healing themselves. And I think
Yeah.
that's so beautiful that
Mm.
we're at the very beginning of that happening. But I see it already. I've got children. I've got a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, and my
Mm.
6-year-old especially, she's very connected to the fae and the fairies and the world. And
Mm.
she is very, very sure on herself. She will stand her ground. She's got boundaries. She will say no if she means no. She will go up to
Mm.
strangers and tell them exactly what she thinks. And I just think like these new
Mm.
beings and these new ways of being are
Mm.
just so beautifully aligned to what we're creating with the earth right now. And so for me,
Mm.
I'm like you said before, I'm so excited to be here. It hasn't always been this
Yeah.
way.
No,
I'll be
no,
honest
yeah,
with
I get
that.
that. Yeah.
But yeah, I am so excited. But then I'm excited about everything, to be honest. I get excited about the little things, that people wouldn't even consider were things to be excited about. But especially
Mm.
now, how humanity is shifting. It's
Mm.
just incredible. I didn't think that it would happen in my lifetime here, if I'm honest. But the amounts of shifts that I'm witnessing myself is just incredible.
Mm. Totally. And I mean, I've been doing a lot of writing for the last 20, 25 years. And I literally started by getting woken up at 4 in the morning with a sentence. And it's like I drag myself out of bed and I go and write for 2 or 3 hours. And I've been writing on and off for all those years. And I've just recently published my book, if I might show it, if that's
Yeah,
all
do
right.
it.
Yeah, so my book, Updating Planetary Consciousness. So it's all about that whole relationship and that whole shift that we're in, because it is profound what's happening. And as you say, you look at the world and you think, gosh, is anything really changing? But then you just bump into people or see things happening and you think, wow, it is changing so fast. And
Mm,
so many people are waking up. And yeah, I mean, I've developed a whole lot of practices and meditations to help people center in the heart to then find out what they do. Because as you exactly say, we are, what, 7, 8 billion people on this planet. We all have a unique part to play in the loving light of this earth. We all have like a big jigsaw puzzle. We
mm,
can't be somebody else's jigsaw puzzle piece. We have to be our piece. We have to find the color, the light, the shape, the presence, the energy that we hold in that beautiful picture of what light is to be on this earth. But we can learn from each other and bounce off what each other have. So that's why I've got a whole lot of practices to help people get to their heart and then say, go for it. Find your way to go from there, to find your light, to open up to that grace, and experience that journey. And it's difficult because we're used to being guided, taught, constrained, given a perspective that belongs to other people as well. So it can be challenging, but there's so many courageous people like you and the people you work with and people I know too who are just courageous. And it's easier and easier to be courageous when we open up to that light and realize that, there's so much good stuff happening in this world and we really need to help create that change.
mm. It's funny you say courageous. I don't always see it as courageous. I just see it as showing up as myself.
Yeah.
And I guess for a lot of people that would be courageous because a lot of people wear a lot of masks and identities. But once you get to the stage where you just show up as yourself in every single situation and relationship, it's like the
Mm,
most effortless thing ever.
mm, mm.
It just is.
Yeah,
It's just easy.
yeah. I think that's about getting into alignment with that light that's inside you because it's compelling and it just radiates from you and it just guides you and enables you to both be radiant and also protected. And that's a very important thing these days,
Mm,
to bring that light and to be able to radiate that light in this world. Yeah,
mm,
it's a wonderful thing. So, yeah, I mean that's very much what my work is too. It's about learning how to listen to the call of the heart, and that's the name that I work under. My website is Call of the Heart, and it is all about that. You know, whatever you see as being your heart, whatever you see as being that center, that source of light. I mean, our heart is our source of livingness, both physically but also spiritually, because our soul, our spirit, brings that spark down into this physical matter in our heart and gathers who we are in our physical and emotional and mental selves around that spark. And when we tap into what that spark is, we're tapping into why we're here. We're tapping into the light we have to bring here. So it's a beautiful thing.
it is so
Mm,
beautiful. My team just want to go back to a point you made about people who are being open. I speak about this quite a lot, but I'd love to
mm,
go a bit deeper with you on this. People who just pick up messages, people who
mm-hmm.
use cat cards and tarot cards and angel cards, and they just buy stuff and then they start dabbling. They start
Yep.
downloading messages and they just assume that everything is from the light. They don't
Mm,
assume because these beings can make it feel like it's from the light, right? Just because you're
absolutely.
downloading from a demonic
Mm,
or a lower dantian energy doesn't mean to say that it's going to feel bad.
mm-hmm.
Actually, they're really,
Mm-hmm.
really good at giving you money, power, fame,
Yep.
making you feel sexy, alive. Actually, they're
Yep.
better at those things than actually a lot of light beings, I would say.
Yeah. I would agree totally. And I think that's the trap because they can make themselves look beautiful, radiant, appealing. They can sound brilliant, and yet they're not. And it's really. I mean, I think the one way I always learned to be discerning is if you're clairvoyant, which I am, you look in the eyes because you
Mm,
can always. It doesn't matter who they are and how much they try and mask themselves with fake light. It's always shows in the eyes. But if you're not clairvoyant, and a lot of people aren't, and that comes with its own mixed blessings, eh, you have to take it somewhere and validate it. You have to find your place of light, of love, and hold those messages in there and make sure they hold that energy,
mm,
independent of being told by any other being. Because, yeah, I know and I agree totally. There's a lot of joking spirits, downright nasty, evil beings who will have a go. I mean, they're as interested in getting through in this world as other beings of life, sadly, and they will try and make mischief. So yeah, so that's I have a little heart practice that I teach people about getting into the heart because that's a place where just like how our heart pumps blood, it circulates in and out and around our heart. In the heart, it's either a flow or a no flow. It's really
mm,
simple. And when you can find a practice, the practice I teach takes you into your heart so that you can learn what that flow feels like and you can hold things into that light and say, okay, is this picking up on that flow of living light that's coming through me or is it not? Because if it isn't, okay, just let it go, see what happens. If it's really a message you need to pay attention to, it'll come back in another way. And then you can do it again and learn to see and resonate with the light that comes with the message, if it's there, and discard those things that do not. But yeah, there's a lot of people in the world caught and trapped by a lot of rubbish, simply. It's simply a lot of rubbish. Yeah.
mm. And even and my team
It's
even want to say, like, even with really, really super successful people as well, I think, oh, I went purple then. Interesting. Um, a lot of super successful people, they will wear this
mm,
badge of success, and people will just assume that everything they say is true and from the light.
yeah,
But
yeah,
actually, I feel like you have to discern every single little decision that you make, right? And everything that someone tells to you, because I think what happens a lot in the coaching industry, especially, is people put other people on pedestals,
yeah.
or they put themselves on a pedestal, and they
Mm,
and people assume that everything that comes out of their mouth that is
mm,
channeled is for them, and it is correct and
mm,
it's true. But
mm,
you
mm,
know,
mm,
I always say to my clients, you do not put me on a
mm,
pedestal. Like, I'm not your guru.
mm,
I'm just here as a
mm,
side mirror to tell you what's
mm,
coming through from source. But and yet you should always
mm.
discern, because if you don't resonate, there'll be a reason, or you're just not ready to receive it right now, and that's fine. Just hold it lightly,
Absolutely.
right? Because you
Yeah,
may not be ready. You might have
absolutely.
jumped on a different timeline, for example, and you're not quite ready for
Mm.
that yet, and that's fine,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, absolutely. And sometimes messages that come, they resonate away inside for they can percolate inside for months, weeks, years before suddenly they start to really hold the truth that you need for a time in your life. So, it's very much like that with what comes from the inner levels, I find. Um, because it is when you really tap into that truth, it will always be there, but you have to just take your own journey to find out when it resonates.
Mhm.
And it is, as you say, it is so important that we take our journey because we can't take anybody else's journey. And I totally agree with you about putting people on a pedestal. I mean, some people are wonderful and beautiful people, and I'm happy to give them love and light for what they do. But I will always take something that people say into my own heart and look for what the truth is for me, because I'm the one who has to make the choices for me. And I think that's a really important message for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And there was another point that my team wanted to tap into. Oh yeah, fear. Um,
Mm,
around this idea that, if you do get this intuitive hit and you keep getting these messages both into your heart, from your team, from nature, and everything's telling you to just do it, you've
mm,
really got to
mm,
keep a check on that fear, that part of your brain that wants to keep everything the same for you,
mm,
and
mm, mm.
really almost switch off that fear signal, right? Because none of
Yeah.
us are immune from fear. It's just our mind trying to keep everything the same. And I think
Mm,
people think that if I'm scared about this, then it's probably not the right decision. But sometimes the fear can be a really, really good indicator that it absolutely is the right
yeah.
decision, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. One of the ways that I help people discern about that is to understand that our emotions are a flowing energy. They can move, but our mind works in the way of analyzing things and breaking things down until you've got a possible choice between one and two. It's like
Mm,
that's what our mind does. It wants to break everything down into a simple choice between this or that. It doesn't like a multifaceted spectrum of things to choose from, and that causes stress. So it's really important to recognize that our mind is a tool for analysis. It's not a tool for spiritual growth. It's a
mm,
tool for discernment about the things that our mind can work with, but our mind can't be the guide on our spiritual path. It can help bring some aspects of perspective, and it can help bring uh, realities in our situations, because sometimes we have to take into consideration other people, other circumstances, situations we're in, and our mind can be a guide for all of those factors, because our mind is focused on our physical world. That's its role, is to help us live in this physical world. It's not equipped to handle the multifaceted, multidimensional world of soul, spirit, and that inner life. And of course, it gets freaked out. And that's where, even though fear is, of course, emotional, it's often our mind that is saying, well, can't cope, too many factors, too many things, can't narrow it down, don't know how to analyze this. And then the emotions get involved and go, oh, okay, we're not certain here. If we're not certain, we can't do it. But it's like, who's certain? I mean, if you're certain in your heart, you don't need your mind to be certain. You just say, okay, mind, come along with the journey. This is what we're doing. It's interesting. It's a game in a way. You have to play with yourself and learn how to work with these different parts, because we've spent so many lives on this earth developing mind and developing emotions. They're strong. They're strong in how they work in us and in our role and life on earth. But we need to allow them to do their role, but not to take over our spiritual journey because they're not equipped. That they can give us input, insight, context, but they shouldn't be the decision makers. We need to find that from that deeper inner place.
Yeah, I agree.
Mm.
I agree. I usually just say if I could cut my head off and still live, I'd probably do that. But I really like my hair. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
so true. So
Mm.
where can people find you, Anne, if they really want to learn more about your work and your book and what you do here in the world?
Yeah, thanks, Lou. So best place is on my website, which is calloftheheart.net. And there is all the information about the book and where you can get it, ebook and paperback, and also all my meditations. There's 8 meditations which are free to download to tune into the heart, and also different healing meditations and cleansing meditations to help clear and energize and activate your body. So yeah, calloftheheart.net is the best place. And also everything I write, and I've got hundreds of things that I've written over the last few years. They're all on the website, so they're all there. So if you're interested in topics of consciousness and soul and the human journey and love and the cosmic mother and cosmos and Sirius, all these beautiful things that give nourishing light to our planet and our beautiful earth, my website has got all that information and searchable, and I hope it uplifts and nourishes people, because that's my service to the world.
That's so beautiful. Thanks. And what we'll do is we will tag any links that you've given us in the bio anyway, so people can easily find you. Um,
Lovely.
and I want to thank you for your service here. You know, connecting to the heart is really, really profound, and it's really something that the new earth is really calling for on so many levels. So I hope that people who are watching this really take note of these topics that are coming up time and time again.
Mm,
It's about
mm,
leading yourself, it's about using your heart space, it's about finding your own
mm,
journey.
mm.
And it's so beautiful. We're so blessed to be here, right? And to do this work.
So blessed, so blessed, and thank you so much for inviting me to be part of your show, Lou. I really appreciate it, and being able to speak to you and your listeners, because it's wonderful to know that we've got these points of light all around the world, and we know we can connect and be part of that community on the inner worlds and just help bring more light into this needy part of our time on Earth. Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Anne. I'm going to stop the recording, but I'm going to thank our listeners, our readers, and our watchers for your time and your energy and your patience with following
Yeah,
us on this journey. And I'm going to stop the recording, and then we'll have a little chat.
no worries. Thank you. Thanks, Lou.
Thanks, Anne. Take care.
Yeah, thank you.